Hours later.
Oh man, this is how it goes sometimes, guys. One step backwards, two steps, I don't know, 4 steps backwards, whatever. The XJ650 Turbo. Possibly Yamaha's worst motorcycle ever made. Definitely the most complicated one, which after time starts to cause a lot of problems, as you can imagine. And this is coming from an owner of one. This bike sucks. This bike really is an engineering marvel, but unfortunately it was just rushed to production along with all the other 1980s turbo motorcycles, except for the Kawasaki one, which they actually took time to produce and was the last one in production. The Yamaha was one of the first and has the most problem. After recording this video, I'm thinking maybe this bike would be better off in a museum than on the road. But there's just one thing keeping me from putting this bike in a scrap heap. Feeling that turbo makes all the little problems this bike has worth it. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Gold Guy YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be working on my 1983 Yamaha XJ650 Turbo. This bike has had a hidden problem. Since I've cleaned the carburetors and got this thing running, basically, it always really didn't start that well, and if it wasn't starting for like 30-45 seconds of cranking, then the bike would get flooded and wouldn't start at all, really. I finally found out the real reason. Check this out. I found out that this #1 carburetor right here is letting in way too much gas. I found this out by putting a clear tube in the drain of the carburetor bowl, running that tube up to the side of the carburetor, and once I let fuel into the carburetor, that fuel level in the hose, and the level is like 2 to 3 millimeters above the gasket surface of this carburetor, which means it's letting in too much fuel and it's actually just sending it right into the cylinder, which totally makes sense because the cylinder #1 was always the coldest. So I actually removed all of the freaking bowl screws off camera without removing the carburetor, just to find out that the bowl cannot fit. It doesn't come off because this bike has such a huge alternator on kind of above the engine, under the carburetors. So what I'm going to try to do now is pull off this side fairing, pull off the seat, and just loosen up the carburetors and see if I can move them out just enough to where I can pull this one bowl off and get the float out, adjust the float tang, thus giving me my correct fuel level without having to completely remove the carburetors. So this is kind of going to be tough, but if I get this done, the bike's going to run and start so much better. So now we should be able to just pull this float out. And there we go, guys. We've got the float out. Now that I've got it out, I can totally see this float tang is like bent down past the stock position, letting in too much fuel. So I'm going to bend it back the other way. And if the fuel level was 2 to 3 millimeters too high, then we're going to have to bend this tab 2 to 3 millimeters down to adjust for that. We'll set it at 2 millimeters and then check. And that is 2 millimeters right there. That's perfect. That's exactly the amount that I've raised it up. And now we've got to get this float back in the carburetors, and the hardest part is going to be getting those 4 bolts back in to hold the bowl on. Something else that's slightly alarming is the level of crap floating around in this carburetor bowl. I have a fuel filter on this bike, so I don't know what the heck this stuff is. It's like gummy looking. It almost has like a metallic shimmer to it. Adjustment has been made. Let's reinstall the float needle. Okay, now that I've got this carburetor bowl all cleaned up, adjustment's done. We just got to get it back in. Oh, there we go. Definitely easier in than out. Oh man, I got it, guys. This is like 20 minutes later, and the bolt has just started tightening. Finally, I can feel it starting to seat. All 4 carburetor bolts are tight, and we didn't have to remove the carburetor. We did the adjustment. Yes! Now we just gotta tighten up all these clamps. We'll be good to freaking go. Yes! I'm gonna loosen up this carburetor drain screw. Okay, I've got my clear tube here. All we have to do is jam this into the drain outlet of the carburetor bowl. Okay, clear tube is installed. Now let's open up the fuel valve on the fuel lines, and yes, that's right, I had to install a secondary fuel shutoff valve because this main petcock leaks, and another XJ650 owner told me that his also leaks, and it sent gas into his cylinders, which is not good. So I just installed this secondary shutoff valve. It's been fine ever since. You gotta hit the fuel pump a little bit, get that fuel flowing. There's still no gas in this bowl yet. Oh, there it is. Now it's coming. Let's see where that fuel level's at. Fuel level is pretty high. Sometimes you can get these floats to seal up just by tapping on the carburetor bowl. I've had that work in the past. Because right now it is not sealed up at all. We've got fuel leaking out past the float. Maybe the problem wasn't that it was just improperly adjusted, but that it is not sealing at all. That could be my issue here. Oh, there's the fuel level. Oh, we might have just gotten it to seal up, guys. Tighten up this carburetor drain screw now. And I gotta replace the alternator cap. Okay, now let's get this guy back on. Now I've got a different problem. So it turns out the fuel pump was basically being on anytime the key was on. So I turned the key on and I could hear the fuel pump automatically turning on. And it should only do that when you hit the starter button or when the bike is running. So I found the fuel pump relay down in here and everything's fine with that. What actually happened, and it's pretty crazy, whenever I had this alternator off because I was messing with the carburetor and it was in the way, when I put it back on, I actually pinched the alternator wires in between the case and this cover. It was grounding out the white with blue stripe wire coming off of the alternator. And basically what that wire does is it sends a signal to the fuel pump relay when this is energized with the bike, which means the bike is running, basically. So since that was being grounded, it was shorting out that part of the relay, and it was making it so the fuel pump was on all the time. So all I'm gonna do is tape up that wire, reassemble it, and we should be good to go. Alright guys, it's the next day. I fixed the fuel pump relay issue. So now, let's see if it starts up nice and easy. Update, it's about an hour later. I've been out here in the soaking rain. I'll take being wet over making my house smell like gas and having my girlfriend yell at me any day. Long story short, I pulled the bowl back off the carburetor and I found out that the float seat, the old one I pulled out, was not sealing. So I got a new one that I had laying around. I put a new O-ring on it. Also, the O-ring that was on it was dry and cracked up, so that might have been actually where it was leaking, not at the needle. Either way, I've got all new stuff here, well, used stuff, but it's verified not leaking anymore by the blow test, so we know this is good. Let's go ahead and get this back in there. It's not all bad. It stopped raining and I'm not having to wait for parts. Now the retaining clip goes back in, needle valves back in. There we go. Float's all reassembled. So I'm going to open up the fuel valve this time and actually check and see if it seals this time. Should have done that the first time. Still leaking pretty bad, actually. Maybe worse than before. Man, I'm getting worse at this. Okay, so I found a different needle valve, the needle part. I put it in, and as you can see, leaking. Pull it closed. No more leaking. I may have fixed it. Check it out. Leaking. Not leaking. Not leaking. Fixed it, boys. Now we gotta put it all freaking back together again. Okay, got the bowl back on. I'm getting good at it. It only took me like half an hour this time. Got my clear tube in the drain line. Now let's get some fuel flowing and see where that fuel level sits. Fuck. It didn't stop. It's still going. It's fine if the fuel pump's not running. Once the fuel pump runs, it just starts leaking past. I tested it on the other side here and it looks like it does the exact same thing. The fuel level is fine right now. It's right here, but if I hit the fuel pump, the bike not running, fuel pump, starter button, it starts to rise above, see? And then it just drains down to where the overflow level is. So yeah. It's the next day and I was thinking about why the carburetor bowls were overflowing with the fuel pump running. Well, when I was doing that, switching on the fuel pump, the engine was not running, so there was no vacuum going to the fuel pressure regulator. I think it was not regulating the fuel pressure because the engine wasn't running and it was just simply flooding out the carburetors. So I'm hoping that everything's fine since I've adjusted that float on the number one. That one seemed to be the worst. So I'm going to reassemble the bike, take it on a test ride, and see if it acts any different now. I also found out how to fix the battery warning indicator. So this is that sensor that's supposed to go in the top of a lead acid battery. Well, I have a sealed AGM battery, so I can't use it. And what's crazy is that someone already installed the resistor that's kind of meant to fix this, but they didn't plug this other end into a 12-volt power source. It was just sitting in there like that. So they only did half the job. I have to do the other half, which is solder this end to a 12-volt source, which I have one right here. So we're going to do that, and then that should take care of that warning indicator light on the dash. Okay, I've soldered the resistor. So I've soldered the resistor to a 12-volt source. I cut off that little battery sensor thing, so I think we're ready to test it. First, let's turn on the key. Oh, that was weird. It blinked a little. Nothing's smoking here, so we might be good. There we go. Not too bad. Still not as good as it should be, though. Really hoping a ride will fix everything up here. Come on, girl, wake up. There we go. Now she's waking up. But now for some reason it is smoking. It does feel like the turbo lag possibly is better. Not as bad as before. But we have to test the other thing, which is if it actually starts up easy, like it should. So here we go. Let's turn the bike off. It always would only start with like half to full throttle, so let's test it now and see if it starts up easily. It should, because the bike's warm. Oh, that is a really good sign. Every time I try to do that before I messed with the carburetor, you'd have to hit like half to full throttle to get it to start up, probably because there was just too much gas in that carburetor bowl, and I had to open up the throttles to let more air in to account for the way too much gas that was getting in there. Let's try that again. If it starts up good again, then I think we've got her fixed. Yep. It never used to do that before. And it is a misty evening. I'm not gonna do too much on the bike because I'm wearing like no gear and it's wet. So those are two really dumb combinations to be out riding in. Alright, that's enough. Woo! Just spun tire there. That was not the clutch slipping, that was literally the back tire spitting out once it hit in a boost. Once all that power went to the back tire, it started spinning, especially on that wet puddle back there. So yeah, I'd say this bike is definitely running better now, and for sure starting better and easier. So I think mechanically this bike is all good, except there's still that oil leak and this battery indicator. So those are the two things we still gotta fix. Alright, I'm gonna cut off the bike here, take a thumbnail picture because this is a really good background. Alright, so, moment of truth. Will the bike start up easily again? Oh, see? It's exactly the same problem I had before. You had to open a throttle to get it started up. It's a weird problem. Let's try it again. See, there it goes. I don't know. Maybe it's just after the bike sits for a second. Alright, we made it home. I didn't put any gear on because I expected myself to be sweating out pushing the bike home with how it was performing today. This whole video is old footage from a month or two ago. Unfortunately, the bike's been sitting in my garage since then. The oil leak has gotten worse and the problems have only added on to each other. Now, the bike doesn't even turn over. The engine doesn't turn over at all. The starter motor is dicked. I think the brushes have worn out from just trying to start this bike so much because it gets flooded so easily. I think it's a fuel pump, fuel regulator issue. Something weird's going on with that. But yeah, now we have to also fix the starter motor. So the problems only keep getting worse, and we never even really fixed any of them to begin with. Oh man, that's just how it is owning the XJ650 Turbo. It's a rare bike for a reason. It kind of sucks. Yamaha rushed making it, and I'm left dealing with fixing the problems, trying to get every little intricate design that they created working again. It has not been easy. So I'm done trying to get this on the road for now. I'm taking a systematic approach with this bike now. I'm going to basically disassemble a lot of it so that I can repaint the bike. I have a decal kit in this box here, so we're going to be kind of restoring this bike a bit more and making it look original. And then I'll worry about fixing these mechanical issues, because it'll be a lot easier to do that when everything's broken down. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really wishing I would have just sold this bike for like $2,000 right after I got it running and just been done with it, been on to bigger and better things by now, but I didn't. I'm stuck with it for now. So let's get this thing back in shape. I'm literally going to start disassembling and painting this thing very soon, so stay tuned for that video, guys, and I will see you next time. Peace